It's a very big bureaucracy, enormous. And many of the agencies are theoretically under his rule, but in practice they do whatever they're doing. And especially the intelligence agencies that have their own agendas in the world. The intelligence agencies don't really talk to the State Department. They don't try to reconcile. The White House will have a hard job getting a stranglehold on many of these agencies.
Now, in just over 30 hours' time, Donald Trump will be inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States. And by all accounts, he and his administration are planning to hit the ground running. Harold Malmgren is a former advisor to US presidents from John F. Kennedy to Gerald Ford, and at 89 years old has a wealth of experience in government. He thinks Trump could have a difficult job stamping his authority on, well, the equivalent of the civil service.
It's a very big bureaucracy, enormous. And many of the agencies are theoretically under his rule, but in practice they do whatever they're doing. And especially the intelligence agencies that have their own agendas in the world. The intelligence agencies don't really talk to the State Department. They don't try to reconcile. The White House will have a hard job getting a stranglehold on many of these agencies. So we have continuity in some form or other, not like the British system, but still much continuity. Very hard to change that.
Well, the president's inaugural address is usually meant to unify the country and set out a vision. But last time round in 2017, Donald Trump painted a picture of dystopian America.
Americans want great schools for their children, safe neighborhoods for their families, and good jobs for themselves. These are just and reasonable demands of righteous people and a righteous public. But for too many of our citizens, a different reality exists. Mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation, an education system flush with cash, but which leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of all knowledge, and the crime and the gangs and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
So then, what will Donald Trump try to do in his inaugural address tomorrow? Michelle Nix is a former speechwriter to George Bush Sr.
It's a conversation with the American people and with our allies around the world, and it's an opportunity, unlike a State of the Union where you have a lot of program initiatives that you may be announcing. This is an opportunity for the President of the United States to lay out his or her vision and to set a tone for the next 4 years.
What do we anticipate that tone will be from Trump 2.0?
Well, it's hard to predict Donald Trump, but I would say, if we look back at last 8 years ago when he did his first inaugural address, that was very dark messaging, if you remember. That was, he focused on American carnage. He talked about America first in terms of any messaging that he relayed about our allies. It was much more of an isolationist point of view. While his aides the other day did mention that they plan to do a message of, quote, light and unity, something much more optimistic and a more unified message, I'll believe it when I see it. I will say that because it's been moved into the rotunda, the Capitol rotunda, it changes the energy of the speech. And Trump really feeds off of a crowd. He likes his rally speeches. He likes the crowds to, applaud and chant, and he won't have that in this instance. It will be a much smaller setting. There'll be a slight echo that he'll have to deal with. and a much more subdued audience. He will be on prompter, so it will be a much different speech for him. And he may, read the words, but I think most people are looking for, will the words match up for what he does? It's hard to believe that he could be giving a message of unity and optimism after he's been unleashing so many comments about becoming a dictator on day one, and arresting members of the press and arresting his political opponents, continuing to say that he wants to investigate the election of 2020, still, relitigating that. All of those kinds of messages are in opposition to any sort of message of unity and optimism. So it will be a challenge to see, what the man delivers as, in his inaugural versus what happens later on in the day. Now, after the Capitol Rotunda speech, there are other events, and one of those includes, instead of an inaugural parade, there's an event at the Capitol Arena, which it will be a much bigger crowd, and that's where he can give his typical, rally speech where he's shouting out to the audience.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's going to be a day of two, at least two different kind of atmospheres, energies, these sorts of things. When you consider the speech writing process, and when you look at what historically has emerged from Donald Trump during these kind of set piece moments, is that as unconventional as everything else about Trump seems to be, Michelle? When you compare your speech writing experience, tell us how that worked, and is there evidence that it is a kind of conventional process that Trump follows in terms of messaging and speech writing?
Well, you know that a lot of norms and traditions have been thrown out the window in recent years. I can say that typically with presidents, an incoming president will sit down with a speechwriter and a number of advisors at the same time, and they'll flush out a number of concepts that they want to convey in the message. And then the speechwriter, usually it's more than one speechwriter that would work on an inaugural address, will uh, build some themes around those messages.
That's Michelle Nix, a former speechwriter to George Bush Sr.